here we are in the new book that we're going to start this week. So you should get out, make sure that you have your Diversity of Life book. This is the one with the colorful little sea slugs on the front of it. I just wanted to put this graphic up here so you know which book that we were getting ready to work out of. And we are going to look today at just pages 5 through 7. So if you go to page 5 in your textbook, I just want to talk about the characteristics that all living things have in common in these first few pages. So first of all, and we've talked about this before, all living things are called organisms. So organisms is just the term for living things. And all living things have several things in common, and this is the key statement in this paragraph. And that is that all living things have a cellular organization, contain similar chemicals, use energy, respond to their surroundings, grow and develop, and reproduce. We are going to look individually at all of those aspects and talk about those briefly here on the next couple pages. But it's also important to notice that all of these examples on this page, A up here, B, C, D, all of these examples are living things. So all of these objects are living. So we're going to focus today on just pages 6 and 7 in your textbook. This outlines the 6 key characteristics that all living things have in common. And after watching this video, I want you to go back and do a foldable for me that organizes the 6 characteristics of living things. So 6 sections, each one devoted to one of the characteristics of living things in which you will put in information. And that's what I'm going to do for you now, is kind of talk about each one of these briefly, kind of highlight and underline the important facts so that you have some information to make your foldable. And then I'm going to have a link over in the module so that you can take a picture of your foldable when you have it done and upload it to a Padlet wall. So let's first go in and look at cellular organization. First of all, and I think you probably know this, and that is that all organisms or all living things are made of small building blocks called cells. Cells are the basic unit of structure and function in an organism. So this goes back to 7th grade. I know you spent a chapter talking about cells and the parts that make up the cells. But cells are the basic building blocks of structure and function in all living things. We do have a couple terms here that I want to point out, and that is unicellular organisms are those that are single-celled, meaning they are made up of only one cell, but that one cell is able to carry out all of the functions necessary for that organism to stay alive. Organisms that are composed of many cells, like you and I are called multicellular organisms. So we are made up of, trillions of cells, and they are specialized to do very specific tasks. So there's specialized cells in your body. You have muscle cells that perform different functions than what nerve cells, but they all work together in order to keep you alive. The chemicals of life. First of all, the most abundant chemical in cells is water, and arguably, possibly the most important chemical that we have in our body is water. But there are other chemicals that living things have that are also important for life that carry their own characteristics. These are not highlighted, and I'm not sure why they didn't highlight these key words. But those chemicals that are important in living things are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. So looking at these individually, the carbohydrates, and you've heard people talk about carbohydrates and they're talking about diets. The carbohydrates are the main energy source for organisms. So when we eat things that have carbohydrates, that's where we get our energy from. Lipids are what are kind of known as, and this isn't really written here, the lipids are the fats in the diet, the different fats that we eat in our diet. And the proteins are what we use for building materials. So carbohydrates are used for energy. Proteins are used for building and repairing cells. The lipids are the fats that sort of help protect the cells. And then finally, we have the nucleic acids, which have the genetic material for the cells. I'm sure you've heard of DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So DNA is a nucleic acid. RNA is also a nucleic acid. All organisms need to use energy, and they get that energy from taking in and breaking down materials. So when we eat food, we're taking in material that we need then to break down and use to turn into energy so that our body can do what it needs to do. That combination of chemical reactions through which an organism builds up or breaks down material is called metabolism. I know that's kind of a very wordy definition, but it's just that balance of the chemical reactions of taking in what the body needs, using the energy in order to perform the daily tasks that need to take place to keep a thing alive. So page number 6 kind of talks about the organization of cells within living things, the chemicals that are needed for living things to survive, and how we use our energy. Going on to the next page then, I want to look at the fact that living things will respond to their surroundings. So in this picture, you see this plant, and you've probably seen this around your house. You see that plants will grow toward light. That is a reaction that the plant has that helps keep it alive. If someone makes a loud sound, you jump in response to that. You have a reaction to that loud sound. If you have a cat in the house, or maybe even a dog, sometimes when you open the can of food and they hear that, or they just hear the can opener, or they hear a sound that reminds them that they're getting fed, they will come into the kitchen because they know they're about to get some food. So all of these types of behaviors are what we call sort of a stimulus response. And it's the way that we respond to our surroundings. So a change in an organism's surroundings that causes the organism to react is called a stimulus. So the thing that makes you react is what we call the stimulus. And then the reaction to the stimulus is what we call the response. So a stimulus happens, that's a change in the surroundings that causes the organism to react. And then the action or the change in behavior that happens is the response. All organisms grow and develop, but it's important to know the difference. Growth is just simply the process of becoming larger. So if you say that something grows, that just means it gets bigger. That's all it means. Development, on the other hand, is the process of change that occurs during the organism's life that produces a more complex organism. So when a baby gets bigger, that's just growth. When a baby learns to crawl, learns to walk, learns to speak, those are developmental changes. So all organisms grow, meaning they get larger. They also develop, which means that they undergo changes that causes them to become a more complex organism. And finally, the last that we want to talk about is that all organisms have the ability to reproduce. If they weren't able to reproduce, they would not be able to continue to keep the species alive. We will spend a chapter or two later talking in more detail about the differences between the types of reproduction. But for now, just know that there is a form of asexual reproduction, which involves only one parent, and it produces offspring that are identical to the parent. For example, when a bacteria cell just divides and splits into two, you started with one parent, just one cell, that divided into two, and they are identical to the parent cell. And then what we're more familiar with is sexual reproduction, which does involve two parents. It combines the genetic material to produce a new organism that is different from both the parents. So most of the animals that we're familiar with, mammals, birds, most plants, reproduce using sexual reproduction. All right, that's just a brief overview of the characteristics of living things. So I would like you to go back now that we've highlighted and underlined and discussed some of these things in more detail and create a foldable for me. That foldable is going to have 6 sections, each devoted to these blue headings that are the 6 characteristics of living things. And then under each of those headings, I want you to just bullet out some of the important facts that we talked about here. And then take a picture of your foldable, either with your phone or with your Chromebook. And there will be an assignment in the module where you can upload the picture of your foldable to a Padlet wall. Alrighty, we'll continue on with the lesson later. Thanks.